All right. Welcome back.
Hey, we're back.
Good to see you guys.
Are we though?
Are we? I don't know. Never.
When people say that, it's always better to be seen than to be viewed.
That's very much so. And you probably noticed a change up in the studio here. Aaron is now behind the camera with Gavin back there. So howdy, guys.
Hey.
Oh, I love this setup.
And there was much rejoicing.
Much rejoicing. He spoke it with awe. Aw, no. Awe. A-W-E.
But it's got huge teeth.
Okay. Well, let's get to it, huh? Today we're going to be talking about Dead Poets Society. Have you guys seen this movie?
One of my favorites.
Well, likewise, you have. Yep. Yeah. And one of my favorite too, only because it's a Robin Williams movie and he has that wonderful speech and with his class where he's like, doctors and lawyers, we need these things to survive, but poets and love, these are the things we need to live.
I am a fan of most of the parodies out in the world as well.
Yes.
So I
Like
just wanna
what?
Say that.
What's a
Like
parody?
there was one, I can't remember this one. I think maybe it was like Mad TV or SNL or something like that, where he gets up on the
desk.
table
Oh,
and there's a fan up there, so it cuts his head off, and so there's blood flying everywhere, and everybody's freaking out, and the teacher ends up getting, it's just nuts.
I'm sure Family Guy did one, and of course the Simpsons have.
Oh,
Can't get away from that. Simpsons doing it.
yeah. This is definitely one of those movies where everybody, has made a parody of it for sure. But I love it, and I think it's going to do a great job of illustrating what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so you guys want to put on your headphones? We're going to watch the clip
Watching it in studio.
in studio. Also part of the new setup. Thank you,
Gotta
Aaron.
be smarter than the headphones.
That one says right.
Don't be so drunk. You don't. What is it? Is it more of this acting business? Because you can forget that. What? Nothing. Nothing. Well, then let's go to bed. That was good. That was really good.
Go on, get some sleep.
Powerful scene. I'll say that do think you guys know this about me. Being a dad is something that brings me immense joy. I had my daughters, and they have me wrapped around their fingers. But ever since having my son, now when I see movies or scenes, involving a father and son, it hits me completely different in a way that didn't before. I never understood it, or maybe I always looked at it from the son's perspective because I always, rebelled against my fathers. But now, as a father of a son, I look at it and now my heart breaks. But this is a perfect example, I think, of adversity nexus in the sense of and Dave, I'll pass it over to you. What do you think happens when or not even disagreement is seen as disobedience by a system, whether it be legal system, family system, civil system?
That really kind of depends. I mean, you gotta, like in this situation, you gotta wonder what we're trying to foster, right? What are we trying to create, right? The funny thing is, it's sort of paradoxical because he wants him to be a doctor. All right. That's fine, but like you think about what has to go into that, right? There's absolutely going to be a defiant nature to that at some point anyway. Second of all, I mean, these are high school kids, right? So, if you were to take this similar scenario and apply, let's say, a football context, right? A lot of kids, they're in high school, they dream of becoming a pro ball player. Statistically speaking, it's probably not going to occur. At what point, I mean, do you let the kid figure it out? Do you talk about reality of this? I mean, it's a similar situation. So at what point do you have to step in and give the dose of reality? Mixed dreams, push. I mean, how do you do that, right? And so that's what I love about this movie specifically, is because we're not addressing that. Most people aren't going to think about that, but when you do apply some contrastive inquiry to this and look at this from other elements, other disciplines, right? For example, all right, so he's been given a lot of opportunities. You're going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. All right. Guy clearly has connections to Harvard. That's awesome. But even if you wanted to be a doctor, do you have to go to Harvard to do it? No. I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced than, I mean, and I get it. So the movie can happen.
Storytelling,
right? And it is very impactful, and we get ourselves locked into the show or whatever. But at the end of the day, not everybody gets to be an actor, right? I mean, so, and then that's kind of
a lot of kids move to LA to think that.
Exactly, right? And there's a whole industry dedicated to people who get lost on the way out, right? And that's kind of what I mean. Like, so at what point could it have been approached better? Yes, absolutely. Would a thorough, logical conversation with somebody who's evidently smart enough to be a doctor have come out better? Probably.
Well, I would
have
say
a conversation.
so. The contrast that I see in that whole relationship, number one, is the father's expectations of what this person is going to be, and that's what it sounds like. Is it's exclusive from what Neil wants. He's found a passion, and it doesn't mean that and so the part of that discussion, and the father and me, the experienced dad, would have been like, yeah, you found something that you truly care about. All right. So, and like you're saying, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be a class A, or what's it called, A-lister actor. You still got bills to pay. You still got life to live and all these other practical aspects. My daughter she actually wanted to she was in theater in Miami and loved it. Loved being behind the scene and doing tech work. Moved to Hawaii and she wanted to continue that. Don't tell her she can't, because she came back with a job working on Lost. She was doing production work on the Lost series. But then fast forward and move on, we moved to California and everything fell apart. So she's, to this day, didn't follow through on that. My point here is that when I think about it from a career development perspective, I used to work at the Shocker Career Accelerator at Wichita State, and my job was to help these students find their path, right? And you've got practical paths, you've got these idealized versions of themselves that they want to live into, whether they may or may not have the skills and abilities to do it, you know. And then you've got this kind of like the discovery zone where you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but
Something about this excites me.
yeah. And so that he may never, his ability to stand on stage and what he loves about that may not necessarily be the acting itself. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe there's so many other sub skills that go into becoming into a profession. And if we can actually help, whether it's our children, the people that we lead, our peers, even when we're leading up, I point out the connections here that just because he's really good at standing on stage and talking doesn't mean he needs to be an actor. Maybe he needs to be a lawyer. Maybe he needs to be, you know, so his talent, skills, and abilities is what matters. And how do you align those things in such a way that dad can feel comfortable going, you know what? Maybe my son's not going to be a doctor. He's going to be a lawyer.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I feel compelled to ruin the scene because the truth of the matter is, and the reason why the drama is there, and the reason, I mean, so the movie can happen, and I get that, but the reason why that's happening is because it sucks everybody into an A-B fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is that he can still go to Harvard and be a doctor, and he can still go explore his acting. They're not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely.
Moreover, that acting might actually help pay for the college that he's trying to go achieve. And that's kind of what I mean. Like there's so many different solutions. It's funny to me how we willingly, even in a movie scenario, allow ourselves to get sucked into the A-B fallacy when the truth of the matter is that it's all a non-issue, right? And there's a million ways to approach that. He could absolutely get everything he wants. At least try it out, see which one works. Because you know what, the converse is equally problematic. He could go try to be a doctor and suck at it. Then what? Right. So I believe that we should absolutely explore more than one thing.
Sure. I think the dynamic between the father-son, though, that's a classic. I mean, in order for the boy to become a man, he's got to kill off his father. I don't mean that in a literal sense. I mean that in a figurative sense. And that part of that is rebelling against those expectations that the father puts on the son. Think about, we used to have blacksmiths, and you were the son of a blacksmith. You were going to go into the family business,
into the trade.
You're going into the trade, you know. And so Smith, you know, whatever, William's son or whatever, the son at the end
Robertson.
of Robert's son. There we go. You know, what is a Robert? Well, you're the son of a Robert, okay. But that dynamic of the father with these expectations on the offspring, it's old as time, right? But the question is, when it comes to leadership, does the father have enough insight and awareness to recognize how those unrelenting standards he's putting on his kids are not, they could be helpful if the kid agrees to fall in line and do what he's told, right?
Well, let's point that out real quick. Dave, you pointed out, is it because we get sucked into these stories that is like father versus son, you know, aspect, because it's an either or fallacy? Like, what is it about this dynamic that is just, for as long as storytelling has been a thing, whether verbal or written, it's always been something about the son and the father. Zeus and his father. I'm trying to blank now. Zeus's father. You know, goes all the way back to ancient Greek times. You know,
Sure.
We're still talking about thousands of years later. The dynamic of it. What about it?
Well, in a lot of cases, that's very true. You know, it exists for a reason. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't achieve the things that they want to in life, so they kind of want to live vicariously through their offspring and know that their life meant something. So if my child can be awesome, then I still have merit. There's a lot of that going on, which sucks. But you know, it's one of those things where the key is truly in the contrast. Where when we understand what we're really faced with, you know, it's we can be set free by the by the tiniest things.
Back to Red, he said, "You have opportunities that I never had."
Right.
All right, so.
And then there's one thing that he points to.
Yes, yeah, and then so there is that. Yeah, I would guess from a psychological standpoint, Red, or the dad's character, he has his own unfulfilled expectations that he's wanting, like you said, wants a second chance at hitting that. through his children.
Right.
Live vicariously through
Yeah,
through them.
so think about this. When we think about the idea of immortality, our reputation, our legacy, the most obvious way to realize that is through our offspring. Like I want to have made a difference in this world. So therefore my kid's going to go off and be an amazing doctor, amazing lawyer, right? And the parent is deriving satisfaction and validation from the actions of the offspring, right?
Mm. That's a
Such a selfish species.
well, yeah, because
The opposite of that happens though too.
Is that
In my
ego?
case. Well, is that ego? Absolutely, that's ego.
we as fathers, parents in general, feel a sense of like, I've made a difference in the world because of what my children did.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is there a level of selfish ego there?
I did that.
Yeah. Look at that. Look what I did.
Look what I can do.
I made that human being. That human being did this awesome thing. So therefore, I am directly or indirectly responsible for that awesome thing that person did.
I've had this specific argument, not that specific, obviously, but I've had that argument with my father, my stepfather. I wanted to play football. No way in hell was I going anywhere with it. I was probably not going to get a scholarship, was probably not going to go to the NFL, obviously. But I loved the sport. I loved the team aspect of it, friends, the relationships built through adversity. And he told me, no, right? You need to quit playing football. You're not going to work. Go get a job. You're 16 years old. It's time to start paying your own bills. Mm-hmm. Well, I quit doing that, but I was also in plays. I loved being, I don't want to say like the main actor, but there was a level of, I loved performing. Mm-hmm. And that caused a lot of friction between the two of us there as well. And so I quit all of that going into my senior year and then just worked at our Dillon's, our local grocery store, as a cashier because it was the only place I could get a job at the time, and I felt so defeated. Mm-hmm. I've like that part of my, I don't know, growth was taken from me, not by force but by choice.
How much of that has changed from a generational perspective? I mean, we read in this character, I don't know his real character's name, and we're just making that 70s show reference, but he's of a boomer generation. Mm-hmm. I would even say pre-boomer, because considering when that movie was supposedly taking place. Sure. But those expectations of masculinity, expectations of just what does being a productive member of society look like based on those expectations versus, I mean, even you and I are a different generation. I'm solid Gen X. You're probably
millennial,
right? So we've got this different expectations from a societal perspective on, back Red's time, following your passion was not even an idea. In fact, I think I read an article somewhere where that idea, the phrase "following your passion," didn't even show up in public discourse until like the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. So up to that point, nobody talked about following your passion. It was about get up, you transition from boyhood to manhood, and when you're a man, you work and you provide, right? But that's, we weren't talking about job satisfaction or even fulfillment from our own passions and interests. Society has shifted. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think there's probably the pendulum has swung so far into the follow your feelings and follow your passion that we've got a bunch of people who think that they can go be in,
the next Brad Pitt.
The next Brad Pitt, but they can hardly string together, sentences, right?
Right.
They're one of the unfortunate that don't know how to read.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Sadly, our education program or system in at least in the United States is so bad that we've got people like that.
Well, let me ask you a question, Lance. Because you've told the story about how you always told your children yes until you have to say no. Mm-hmm. So when does structure become control?
Great question. I think it's about adaptability. It's like, I used to also tell them there's no such thing as a right or wrong decision as long as you make the most of the decision you make. If you choose to go rob a bank, you're going to pay the consequences and you're going to go to jail, but you still have the opportunity to turn that story into something good, right? Would I encourage my kids to go rob a bank or do, no, of course. We also want to educate them on the systems in place and the repercussions of there are repercussions for our actions. So the question is, at what point does a system become, I want to use your,
At what point does structure become control?
control.
So as a father, father figures are often depicted as the
Control
disciplinarian, the controller, whatnot of
Well,
do this, don't do that, blah blah blah. But at what point, kind of going into what you said kind of earlier, what point does you as a father, are you providing structure,
Okay.
or are you controlling
So,
their
so
outcome?
the two father or parenting lessons that I always pass along is a parent's job. Say yes unless you have to say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the counter to that is, blanking it. Don't say yes until they have to say no. And then a parent's job is to become unnecessary. And that point right there, to become unnecessary, is what we're talking about. There is that control. We want to empower our children to the point where they do not. It isn't. We don't need to control them because they are putting their own mechanisms in place on their own terms. Judgment and discernment is what we want to teach our children to have, so that we do not have to control them. And I would say one of the hallmarks of a controlling parent is they are ruled by fear. They're governed by fear. They're afraid of what's going to happen. They love their kids, but they also do not want that child to be hurt, or they don't want that child to be a failure, or they want to make sure that child lives into that child's potential. All of that is the counter to that is rooted in the idea of fear. Like, I'm afraid that that's not going to happen, therefore I better do something to make sure it happens.
Right.
And so that's
And as we
when fear takes over is when that systems of becomes control.
I did have something up before we got
Yep.
too far down. You had talked about, somebody going to have like a dream, and maybe they can't string. What I wanted before we got too far down, I wanted to cut in and ask about how that works with the adversity nexus, because part of the adversity nexus is vision building.
Oh yeah.
So where's the checks and balance on that? Where is the creative vision but a realistic vision? How does that work when it comes to the adversity? I know that we're kind of bridging off. Before we got too far, I wanted to make sure we got on
my
that.
question. Like,
Absolutely.
at what point does it become control, though, from you as a parent point? Like, are you creating a realistic vision for your children, or is it just your vision?
Well,
Well, and that's sort of the thing, right? I mean, is it your vision or is it their vision? And here's the thing: they can have their vision, they can chase their vision, they can chase their passion, but they can still, still fit within the rules and obligations that are there. But therein lies the actual word; it's obligation, right? So, like when I was in school, I had to, or in high school, I had to pay for certain things related to my car, right? And so I had to do it. I had to hold the job, but I was also a football player, and I was in performing arts, and I was in the choir, that department as well. So I was able to do all of these things so long as I took care of my obligations. And that was the same thing that I had in college. And what allowed me to explore more than one discipline was, all right, we'll let you do that so long as you're hitting these criteria. Like, you have to keep your grades up in order to explore other things. Okay, fine. Challenge met, right? I know what that obligation is. If I can hit that obligation, do whatever you want, right? And so now sometimes I took that a little bit to the extreme, because then I was a bit of a goofball because my academics were sometimes easy. So I'd be a little disruptive to the people maybe next to me that weren't as
advanced.
that struggled a little bit with the same concept, which, looking back, was probably just immaturity on my part. But, whatever, I was there, I was having a good time. School was fun. But there's the thing, it's the obligation. So we have to set the obligation. Like, what is it you want me to do, Dad? All right, well, what does success look like when we get there? What success looks like? What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to do it? And what does success look like? Anything above and beyond that, is that open for me to do? Okay, so as long as I'm meeting that obligation, I can go do what I want. My grades are good. I'm studying for whatever you want me to study for. The rest of it's my time.
back to, I think, what I agree 100% in that, in the sense that there is, again, a parent's job is to become unnecessary. If you have demonstrated you're meeting your obligations, I as a parent do not have to intervene.
Yep.
All I have to do is check in on you, supervision, right? Inspect what you expect. And so, yeah, okay, doing well, good. What? Oh, you've got this other side interest. As long as it doesn't deter from your primary focus right now, I'm excited to see how that goes, right?
Yep.
Not every parent has that mindset. Not every parent whoever was supervising you at that point had trust and confidence that you were going to get things done, right? Back to what Aaron was talking about in the sense of the adversity nexus itself. When we think about Neil in this dynamic in the movie itself, he is in a state of stagnation. He realizes that he was on a path that did not resonate with his sensibilities, his desire, and his talents. Robin Williams' character was like, "Hey, poetry, it's life. Why wouldn't you do that?" And so he tapped into a part of Neil's personality that was stagnant, and what caused stagnation leads to adversity, right? Neil's in a state of adversity. What do we need? Adversity creates desire. Does Neil desire to change? Robin Williams' character gave him the change, the leadership that he needed to transition into this different state of growth and development. In part of him that was stagnant. It was stunted. Well, his father didn't give a shit about that part of him, right? So the value, the growth, and the value that Neil is experiencing in that phase of his development, his father doesn't honor because he doesn't see value and merit in it. So it doesn't matter whether Neil is getting his grades, doing all the good stuff, because his father has unrealistic expectations or discounts the other possibilities.
Right, and it's sort of paradoxical for me when I look at that too, because what I see is the father trying to say that he's got so much faith in his son to do all these amazing things, while simultaneously saying that he has no faith in his son to accomplish all these things.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's a mixed signal. Of course, that kid's going to be jacked up, right? But it's also funny too, because there's endless examples of where somebody can do more than one thing, right? I think of the
Everybody
guy
at this
from
table.
Hangover, what is his name? The Asian character.
Oh yeah. I
Do you know who I'm talking about?
yeah, I remember him from
Can't remember
Community.
his name. Yeah, anyway,
I'll allow it.
He's a
Chang.
Chang. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a highly accomplished individual.
He's a medical doctor.
He's a medical doctor. He's an actor. He's a comedian. He's a lot of things, and he's a riot, from what I understand.
Perfect example that he could have gone to Harvard and still been an actor.
There you go. Right.
But did you die?
But did you die?
Die from it? Yeah. So, and that's sort of my point. I mean, like, we're surrounded by these individuals, and this goes back to some, goes back a long way. I mean, look at guys like Jackie Gleason, involved in a variety of different things, business acumen, but also talented individual. I mean, it's not like that, and while it may be rare, it's not absent from our sphere of sight. So it's I get it, because the movie has to happen. But
The A-B fallacy, the either or.
exactly.
We
But
need
here's
drama.
the problem, is that a lot of people who maybe don't have the willingness or desire to dig a little deeper or critically reflect upon some of the things that are there, see a movie like this, see it as great, and then try to emulate or reject, right? So, like, no matter how you look at that scene, whether you see it from the father's from the father's point of view or the son's point of view, the way I look at it is they're both highly flawed, right? So whether you're trying to have empathy for the son or empathy for the father, either way, you're kind of jacking up your own mindset. Like, you got to be careful. These things can be adopted.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
think about it from the mother's point of view too. The mother played an important part in that whole scene, but never really said anything towards the end, right?
Yeah, didn't have
She
any.
knew the tension. She knew the nature of her son. She knew the mindset and expectations from her husband and the father. She did not speak out. She did not defend her son. She played a very specific role in the power dynamic within that room. But you could also see the deep sadness and empathy she was feeling towards her son, right? So when we think about the family dynamic, and you and I have talked about this, Dave, it's like we want within our family, we need leadership, and Red in that dynamic, He is clearly the leader in that family. But we also see his narrow vision and his lack of empathy. And the mother character there was quite an obvious available resource for him as a leader to gain perspective on the whole challenge that family was dealing with. But he did not. Mom was silent.
Here's the other thing too. I mean, you look at again, we train people how to treat us. We are training our children how to be functional adults or dysfunctional adults, as it were. In this situation, we've got a father who's training his son to be compliant, subservient, and to sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is a terrible thing to teach your children to do, especially if you want them to be some powerful individual. Right, you want them to be some powerful doctor who just is going to take it on the chin, sit down, shut up. That's
It's paradoxical.
yeah, it's not gonna end well for you. The other side of it too is that, you know, the son was empowered, evidently. You know, watch the movie, you see he's empowered, and then he sits down. So here's Red giving him an opportunity. He says, "What? What do you feel? What?" Mm-hmm. This was the moment that he could have stepped up and said, "You know what? Here's what I feel, Dad. I've given this a lot of thought. Here's my logical." You know, whatever their family name is, debate.
Perry.
Yeah, let me give you the full meal deal here, and make the claim. And in that moment, when he needed to do it, when he needed to step up and be his own best advocate or be a true advocate for his family, to really, as you would say, kill off the father. This is his moment. And he didn't answer the call.
Oh, no, he didn't.
So he absolutely, in a lot of ways, and I'm sorry, but he kind of deserves the next 4 years, right? Because he clearly needs to build a backbone. And if it's that frustration, now we're looking at the adversity nexus. He's got to hit that bottom. He's got to hit that bottom, no matter what. In order to hit that next turn, he's going to have to find that adversity.
Well, given how the movie ends, he had maybe 40 more minutes.
Right.
He also right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, and
Or I should say it that
yeah,
way.
tragically, and the ending of the movie, you could see, Red's character finds his son and is absolutely just devastated. This was not a father who was just being controlling and abusive. This was a father who was acting in what he believed was his son's best interest,
Sure.
and was like, you can't see it, I do, but in turn, that completely emasculated his son, if that's the right terminology. You know, took away his son's power, and your son obviously was left with what he felt was no other choice, and that's heartbreaking. Again, I watched that. You know, I hope that I never make my son feel that way in any capacity. But if we're going to sit here and talk about leadership and growth, how do we talk to fathers and sons who watch this? And as you pointed out earlier, we gravitate to whichever one we sympathize with, you know, whether it's the rebellious son or it's the father who thinks that they're doing everything in the best interest of the children. What do we do to help them see that both of them, you know, are stuck in rigid ways?
First things first, call a spade a spade. If we're going to sit here and talk about leadership in any way, shape, or form and then try to correlate the two, we have to understand that that's not what leadership is.
No.
So you are not seeing it in any scenario in that scene at all. Like, what you are watching is management, maybe, right? You're watching compliance. You're watching,
control and compliance.
Yeah, I mean, you're not seeing leadership. You're seeing a lot of emotional contortion from both sides. From all three sides. You're seeing a lot of giving up, right? Lack of vision, lack of direction, lack of solution, lack of options, A-B fallacy. You're watching Dunning-Kruger, cognitive dissonance. You're watching the Einstellung effect. You're watching anchoring by. I mean, you are.
Did we just watch that in that entire scene right there?
Yes,
wow, we covered all the bases.
So there's a lot going on there, and none of which is conducive to a positive outcome. There's not a single element there. But the one moment, the part that I'm talking about, the one moment that could have set it free was when given the opportunity to say, what do you feel?
When he didn't create his own agency.
There you go. He could have stepped up and said, boom, and it would have changed the trajectory of everything.
Okay, so for a son's
Potentially.
perspective, how do we talk to the son? Lance, I'll give you this one, and say like, okay, like this is your moment, or how do we talk to sons who have they know they've had that conversation with their father, and you know, as you said, 4 years you're gonna have to deal with the consequences and then come back to it. How do they fight past that sense of I don't know, like I don't even know what to call it honestly. You know, is it regret? Is it fear? Is you know what could a son be feeling that makes them not step up to the moment and you know stand up to the father?
Well, I think there's there's a legacy of disempowerment in that family. Red's character, I mean, that's not the first time that kid has been boxed in, right? That's not the first time. He's constantly been living under the expectations of his father that he never felt like he was good enough, right? And so I would say the first thing as a father, I want to answer it from a father's perspective first, is that the power that we wield is dangerous. And that goes for anyone. The power we have over others is dangerous if it is abused, if we are not aware of how our words and our actions affect others. Does that mean we should not have power? No. It means that we as good leaders understand that dynamic.
Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. Thank you, Spider-Man, you know. Uncle Ben. But, you know, we've got that. Is that dynamic there, that father, he understood the power that he had in that family, but he also underestimated the strength of his, or maybe overestimated the strength of his son. He thought that I'm going to push on you and you're going to be okay. Well, finally, the kid, and you might look at this from other way too, is like he is reading about poetry and these idealized concepts of love and transcendence that we read about in literature, and even these notions that taking one's life is kind of noble. I mean, we think about Socrates and drinking the hemlock, and you know, these are moments in our literary history
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, you know,
Good example.
You know, so the concept of like, well, if I can't live my purpose, I don't want to live at all. Okay, well, that's kind of self-defeating, right?
And childish.
And literally childish, because there's children. One of the developmental phases of childhood is understanding that you are not omnipotent. You can't, just because your parents are getting a divorce, you being a better child is not going to stop that divorce from happening. Just because you can't live your this idealized version of yourself doesn't mean you shouldn't live, right? So,
Dave, I'll ask you this: if the adversity in this situation, as it ultimately is unresolvable, is that truly adversity, or do you feel that it's more entrapment? I mean, if the son took it on as like the feeling of I'm trapped, like this is no longer a life that I chose or I signed off on because his father is imposing his will, and he didn't take the adversity, as you said, to create his own agency and stand up to his father and say, this is the moment for me to say this is how I'm going to be myself. He went the other direction.
Well, so the adversity nexus at this point describes where he's at in that process, but both are actually suffering from a tremendous, we'll call it affliction of epistemic rigidity. And it's not so much the adversity nexus that's the problem here. That's just basically his location, right? So he has the desire, maybe he found the leader, but like he's dealing with the adversity. He's stuck with the adversity, and that adversity is maybe family, preconceived notions, belief in you know, the almighty power of Red, or whatever the situation is.
I'm gonna run with that.
Yeah, you know, and so
Red would like that,
or even maybe in a lot of sense, the lack of power, right? When the truth of the matter is, he doesn't have to listen to it. He literally go off and do his own thing at any time, right? So, like, where did this belief come that he's this one moment in his life is somehow going to dictate everything?
Do you think it's conditioning in that case?
A
Then
lot of it's conditioning. Yeah, absolutely, right? But the truth of the matter is, like, it's fake. The kid's a teen, right? Late teen. If he's not already 18, or he's about to be, like, it all changes in just 10 seconds, kid. hold out.
So one of the things, some class I've taken is theories of suicidology, and when we think about the root of how and why that happens is hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so hope is the thing that I mean, in Chile, you know more about this than anyone in the room here. Is like hope is the thing that prevents somebody from taking their own life. They have hope that they can continue, then chances are they're going to walk the other direction, right? So Neil, in this scenario, has just felt this great moment of joy being on stage and doing what he's doing and finding his kind of this calling and understanding of talent that he feels good about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his dad took took away the hope that he had.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well-
Chili, what do you got?
Well, yeah, just when you brought me up there, I gotta take these off real quick when I talk. But so you talked about hope, right? And I'm trying to think back of when I, effectively committed suicide in the garage or whatever. That was there was definite loss of hope because I had just gone through the Marine Corps stuff, right? Just gone through that. And I had one fabric left, and that was my family. Well, that was falling apart. So I was losing my hope of the things I kind of loved, things I held on to. And in this scene, he clearly, there's a love with his father. I mean, he loves his father. His father loves him. In fact, it's very hard for me to think. There's obviously situations where somebody would commit suicide, and there wasn't a situation with love. But often there's a connection. There is a love that is lost in these situations. In mine specifically, there was. So, and when you talk about hope being lost, I had lost two forms of major hope. I'd lost all my friends, my best friend, and then you rebuild your life, right? You go back and you rebuild your life, and I have a family now, and I have children, and it's like, okay.
These are my anchors to this world now.
And then I'm losing that, and so it was a definite loss of love and hope, and I wish I would have had adversity nexus and these things back then, because I would have seen I'm in adversity. I need to create a vision. Maybe I can do this. I'm not going to get everything back, but I could create something. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the creation aspect. I did. I was a very creative person. I still am. And I was then. But I didn't. If you can do it in work, you can do it in life. I wasn't doing it in life. I wasn't being creative in my life. Mm-hmm. And going, what could I create in my life that gets some of this hope back? So hope's a huge word. I had lost it. Didn't know how to create it. So
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? That's actually why I developed or designed the adversity nexus the way that it did. There were a couple of other ways that I could have approached it, but I decided on a circle, the cyclical nature. There are ups and downs in our life, right? And the biggest thing that we typically have to contend with is the illusion of instant gratification. Like, well, I'm being told no now, everything is ruined. No, that's not the case at all. Just it's not, right? And so you could be,
I don't know. Don't tell that to my daughters.
yeah, right. Well, it's sort of like, you could have everything awesome and figured out right now. That's great. Well, there's going to come a time, and it's just going to happen, where you're going to have a low, because it's cyclical. And if you're in your low, you just got to kind of hold out and don't have no in your heart. Go Joe Dirt on it, because it's going to come back, and you're going to be on another high. And it's going to change itself, right? We lose our family members, we lose our friends, we lose these things. But there's a future. Eventually, you're going to be somebody's low spot when you go, right?
I think that pattern is so. That's the key to all of it, is understanding. I mean, granted, I'm almost 53 now, and I've seen the pattern play out in my life enough times now to know, to recognize it is a pattern. This is not, and it isn't, and the ups, the highs and lows aren't rooted in my sense of self-worth.
Right.
And so when we think about Neil and that dynamic there, he's probably gone through maybe one cycle of adversity in his life, and probably he wasn't even aware of what it was. He was like, okay, maybe, or maybe this is the first real adversity he's ever experienced. So he doesn't recognize that, like you said, the low is gonna, the sun will rise tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Well, you said something there. I want to ride that train for a second. He's constantly seeking his father's approval? Would you say, like,
Yeah.
maybe that's even why he didn't step up to the moment. Was that he wanted, his father to say, like, I accept you as you are. Go be an actor.
Yeah.
He wanted to hear those
Uh-huh.
those words. But let's just keep it specific from the son's perspective. And he's looking up at his father. Holds his father in high reverence, wants his approval, but his father is refusing to adapt to the change, that his son is not going to pursue the career that he wants for him. How many sons do you think are out there right now that are stuck in that
Oh, so many.
cycle?
Yeah, so
You know?
many. And it goes back to what Dave said, is like they're yes, their father may not approve of them. All right. But that individual, that not this father, but the son, is giving the power to the father. Is we're conditioned. It goes back to learned helplessness, really. Yes, we're taught how to behave, and when we don't comply to the way we've been taught, then we're bad.
Yeah.
We're not a good person. Well, that's not the case, really. It's not. That's again that's contortion. We are not. Our sense of self-worth. Our sense of self-worth is rooted to how we're praised by our caretakers, right? But there comes a point where we can look at. I remember I can look at my father and go like, dude, this guy's messed up. I don't need his approval. Logically, I can say that, but emotionally, there's unconscious stuff that happens. But we can't necessarily see the truth in that if we're not aware of it. And this goes back to unconscious bias. And
So here's the thing, right? This is one of the things that it still messes with me, right, about the adversity nexus. Probably will mess with me for the entirety of my life. To me, it's one of the most impactful elements that most people don't talk about when they're examining this. First and foremost, because it is cyclical, you can absolutely plan for it, right? So like my daughter, I'll give you a great example. I tell my daughter, and maybe it's morbid to some people, but like, look, kid, I'm not going to be around forever, and you need to be okay with me going. Which means that you have to, so like I say, if everybody else in the world dies today, you still have to live your life, act accordingly, right? Well, kid, I'm going to go away. I don't know if it's going to be by a truck that hits me on the way home today, or because of some sort of disease that I haven't been able to acknowledge or know ahead of time or whatever, but I'm going away. So I need to make sure that you are squared away before that happens. Let's work on it every day. What can we do, right? That's ultimately what I wanted to do as a father. Now, of course, she's 20 years old now. She basically her own adult, but we still collaborate, we still talk about things, and that's fantastic. I'm there if she needs me, sort of a thing, right? But on the other side of this, we could look at the adversity nexus and know full well that there's going to be a positive side to your negative right now, right? Now, here's the question. If that's true, then what can you be doing today to plan for that time? Paradoxically, everything that you do to prepare for that time will absolutely help manifest that time. So if you really want to expedite this high in your life, recognize where you're at, lean into it, start planning, start orchestrating the things in your life to prepare for the high that you're eventually going to have, and you will simultaneously orchestrate the outcome that you would love to have.
it's creating your own reality.
Creating your own reality. But here's again, key is in the contrast. If you're sitting here dwelling on all the nonsense in your life, you will absolutely manifest the outcome that you don't want. That's why, like, safety is the paradox, right? Safety is the scary part that we should avoid. If you orchestrate your life to play it safe, you're absolutely going to create the box of stagnation. And again, it's the key is truly in the contrast.
Which, by the way, he said it twice before you this
I
episode.
know, and I was wanting to really celebrate that moment, but I didn't want to cramp
Oh,
the
that's
string.
right. The thing.
So let's just acknowledge, Dave. Good job.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody.
I feel weird not being able to give you the high five.
But you know what I mean? And that's what's so fascinating about it, right?
Well,
And, sorry, go ahead.
So, Aaron, pull up that graphic if you can, the adversity nexus. When you think about, I think about that cycle, and the big epiphany for me when I think about that is like, we experience adversity in all walks of our life. It could be our job, our relationships. This cycle is constantly happening in every aspect. You can look at anything going on in your life,
No,
and you can place yourself.
it's three-dimensional.
Yeah, yeah. And the reality, the wisdom comes when you have the objectivity to recognize that you are not in any of those outer things. I love the idea of like we place ourselves in the center of it. The center of the adversity nexus is that calm, the eye of the storm, where we can look at our life and go, hey, you know what? I am not happy with my job right now, and that is why I feel like crap when I come home at night. I feel like crap when I come home at night, which is causing some friction within my marriage. So all of these things are tied together, but if we have the objective ability to see it, and like you said, take a proactive measure in this, like, okay, I'm not happy in my job. What can I do about it? You know, Aaron just talking about the video production techniques that we're using, and he goes through, he narrates this entire contrastive inquiry that he did with himself in order to recognize that, you know, the best place for him is behind the camera because we're going to get a better quality product. We're still going to get the input that he has here, but we as a team now have learned because he's gone through that. He knew where he was in the adversity nexus.
Well, and that's sort of the thing too, because like, what's the thing he really values right now? You look at a lot of the things that he's doing in other areas of his life. It's all around being awesome at this, right?
And Gavin.
Hey. And so, right, so that effort, right, that it's still very much important to him, but it's a learning process. It's even though he's great at it, but that's the thing. Like, where does he suck? That's what he's interested in. It's paradoxical in that regard. He doesn't advance himself by trying to be awesome at what he's great at. He's tries to get awesome at what he sucks at.
He's not doubling down on what his strengths are. He wants to know what his weaknesses are and address them.
Exactly.
And somebody who is safety minded would not do that.
Would not do that.
Right. I think that comes to the I did contrastive inquiry on myself. I said, what am I lacking at? And I started realizing that we're doing a podcast that is essentially live. We just recorded in one take. I've never been a live producer, and I had to stop and think about that and go, like, 30 years in doing film where I have time to weeks to work on the project afterward, and I was like, that's not what we do here. I have to do something I've never done, but I still have a lot of skills. Can I put those skills into this? So I did. I used the adversity nexus. Said, I'm in adversity. What is the vision that I want? Well, the vision I want is to create a really cool podcast for us because I know I can do it. I've never done it technically, but I know I have the skills. So I went mad scientist mode. Yeah, I have the drive, and I went in mad scientist mode. I started researching. I started looking at. I talked to my mentor Mark August, who is he's the one that helped me out in Hollywood when I was there. I still talk to him today. It's like, how can I do this? That's where I started getting into the equipment and different things, and you'll see it on the YouTube show. I do some crazy stuff there, and every time I do something, I'm thinking, how does this work for exegesis? Because that's the end goal. That's the main thing. I'm keeping the main thing, but I had to go into a little bit of a cave and a mad scientist mindset. And it is 100% adversity nexus. 100%.
Aaron's the walking example right there. Right here for Keating the
We
contrast.
all are.
That's the beauty of it. We all are. And the question is, and the challenge for our audience is like, you are too. Everyone out there is capable of learning about the adversity nexus, laying this template over your life, and then seeing these moments where you're like, oh, all I got to do is jumpstart. I have a desire for change. What do I need? When you have a desire for change, you need leadership. And where does that leadership come from? It either comes from internally or externally, right?
Well, and that's the other thing too. I mean, it's like, even if you don't know, right? All you have to do is sort of imagine. Just use that beautiful brain to go, wouldn't it be cool if, right? And then it may not happen today. It may not even happen tomorrow, but it doesn't matter. If you put enough pieces of that vision together, eventually you're going to get there. Right? You know, and that's all it is. It's just pieces.
And Neil could have done that too.
Absolutely, 100%.
Neil could have easily said, you know, Dad, you're right. I love theater. It's going to be my hobby. I'm going to do this, and I would really like your support.
No, go ahead. But I do have a question following when you're done with your statement.
I would really like your support, but I would also, not just your support as in lip service. I'd like you to recognize how much this means to me. You know, that's advocating for yourself. This is an important note too, is like you said it to begin with. just because we have conflict in a relationship does not mean we don't get along. All right, conflict is a natural part of things. Kim, you and I have different views on all sorts of things, right? I don't eat cheese. You might eat cheese. Well, if we order a pizza, we're going to have some fucking conflict in this house, right? Okay, we got to figure that out. But it isn't a reason for me not to advocate for non-dairy options and
Right.
whatever we're going to eat.
Yeah.
Okay? That's so many people in relationships thinks that because we are in a state of conflict that we cannot reconcile, or that we can, or that we can just agree to disagree, but also find a compromise in some way, shape, or
That's the
form.
problem with the AV fallacy. That's
Yeah.
the problem with this conditioned all or nothing nonsense. I
Tell me how you really feel.
I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I think it's a contributor to division. It's a
Tribalism?
stagnation.
Yes.
Stagnator of a tribe. Yeah. It contributes to the stagnation of ideas and growth and prosperity. I mean, individually or otherwise. It's terrible.
But it's also used as a tool to prevent growth intentionally.
Oh, yeah.
If you and I refuse to get along, we can never align together to advance a greater goal, right? So if somebody doesn't want that greater goal achieved, just keep us divided.
Oh yeah, and then I add in a little sprinkle of learned helplessness, and I will absolutely keep you locked into old patterns. It's such garbage.
I want to point something out that you brought up earlier, made me think of a good question. And this scene is a perfect example of, I think, what happens in the real world more often than not. A son does not feel supported, loved, whatever by the father. That there's a difference of opinion of what one expects of the other, and more often than not in the real world, the sons kind of take a direction that is very drastic and self-destructive. Not always as it ends in this movie. I'm trying to stay away from the S word on here, but what it's hard because I remember feeling this way with both of my fathers, my stepfather and my biological father, of trying to say, like, this is who I am. This is, why can't you accept that? And I put myself back in that situation, so I'm struggling right now, so I apologize. But
No, you're good.
if agency is what a son needs in this specific example, to be able to stand up to the father and say, this is who I am, accept it or not, I am still going to be who I am. What do we do about the ones that feel that they need support in order to have their own agency? Is that even agency?
Well, but see, this is the part that, again, I know it has to happen because of the movie, but here's the recommendation. I mean, right out of the gate, right? If we're gonna look at this objectively, here's the thing: why not be excited about going to Harvard and trying to become a doctor? Right? Why not? Right? That's pretty cool that your dad's gonna pay for you to go to Harvard and become a doctor. Right? That's pretty darn neat.
But if the kid doesn't want to be a doctor and has
Yeah.
never wanted to be a doctor,
and what if it actually forces the kid to do the opposite, as I did?
Okay.
I did everything. If my dad said do this, I just did completely the opposite despite him.
Okay, but again, here's the thing, right? If you look at college, right? That's not all you do, right? He would go to here's the thing. Let's be very clear about this. He's going to go to college. He's going to get wrapped up with the same type of kids that he's wrapped up in with now. He's going to be living his life doing that kind of stuff anyway. He's just going to have the benefit of being a doctor on top of it, and his dad's paying for it. He's a good student. You get your grades, do some amazing stuff. You're going to be saturated with it anyway.
But so you make that observation as a man who has lived a life and have perspective. That Neil in that story
Has no other perspective.
Okay, but where was Robin Williams' character to tell him, like, look, yes, there's no money in this. Go live your life. See, and I think, again, if we really wanted to dig into this, this is a failure of that character's position too. Because, like, look, your folks probably aren't going to want you to go chase a philosophy degree, right? Your folks aren't going to want you to go do this or whatever it is, right? So, okay, but of course you want to do it, right? So here you go. You can do this. Where was that leadership to help these kids navigate the complexities of that dynamic. Again, we can ruin this movie from the floor up if you want to, because most of it wouldn't have happened had anybody done what would have objectively been done in a real world scenario. Because I think that Robin Williams character should have gone all goodwill hunting with it and been like, all right, so here's the deal. This is what you can do. Here's some perspective. Here's how you can navigate this moving forward. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Poetry is not. Look, I love Robert Frost. I can read me some Robert Frost and I will come to tears, but I don't live it every day, right? And that's kind of what I mean. Like there's very little true perspective in this movie. And unfortunately, if we really wanted to point fingers, it's not at Red, it's not at the boy, it's at the teacher who's messing with these kids' mind anyway, without providing a heavy dose of perspective
reality.
anyway.
Reality and perspective.
Well,
Absolutely.
I yield back on that one, but
I
No.
digress.
No, but I think that's a good point in the sense that Robin Williams character, you know, the Captain My Captain character, he's just as idealistic as Red, just on two ends of the spectrum. You know, one's the brain in the sky, you know, mind in the sky, idealized, romanticized version of what passion is. And then you've got the hyper utilitarian functional dad who's not recognizing that you need some labor in life, right? And this AB fallacies, the challenge, right? But I want to go back to your point about your dads and you know, we Neil's character, your character, you, when you were that age, we are underdeveloped. We don't know what we're doing. Our brain isn't necessarily fully developed until we're 26 years old, right?
Yeah.
Right. So our cognitive abilities are limited, and as parents, we know that. In fact, I've sent my kids an article about it when they were like I think they were 8 or 9 years old, and I said, you need to read this. And they were young, but it was an academic article about how Maddie read it, and she was like, so you're telling me my brain's not attached? And I was like, yeah, I'm telling you, your brain is not attached till you're 26 years old. So if I ever look at you and I said, your brain's not attached, it's because you are not seeing the same coming to the same logical conclusions that I'm coming to. And I'm not telling you we can't explore those topics, but I'm telling you that you need to understand that you do not have a mature, wise perspective yet. And I want you to at least own it. Own your ignorance so that you can grow beyond it. And we've said this in my family before. It's like, don't get louder, get a better argument, right? Neil, Red got in his face and got louder and then said, hey, tell me how you're feeling. And Neil couldn't get loud.
Back down.
And he definitely didn't have a better argument. So therefore,
Well, would you argue that Neil felt like, you know, even if he did stand up for himself, that he still wouldn't be heard? That he wasn't, you know, it would fall on deaf ears?
potentially, but there you go back to Robin Williams' character. You know, if we're going to spend all this time trying to educate these kids into being their best true self or whatever, well, then, all right, where's the responsibility of helping the kid formulate an argument to the parents?
he's an English professor. Teach rhetoric, you
Teach
know?
rhetoric or something, yeah. I mean, absolutely, right? And that's kind of what I mean. Like, so, and I'm sorry if I'm ruining the movie for everybody. But if we're really going to take a lesson from it, we have to understand that it's multifaceted. It's not an either or situation. There were a whole bunch of missing components to it. And really, it's not all or nothing. It was all and something.
But it's also indicative of so many families. They have that. They think that
Sure.
way.
Yeah, absolutely.
They think that the power dynamic at play here, regardless of the logic and the lack of, and that you know, bifurcated thinking, you're either or, you know, there is a power dynamic at play that was exploited. Red was a overbearing father who probably was raised that way. He didn't know any different. But the power dynamic at play definitely has an impact, good and bad, but more bad in that scenario than good, because Red wasn't willing to deviate from his expectations for the whole scenario. He's like, my way or the highway.
And you can also see too, where if you were to look at this objectively through we'll call it variables, you'll see that this same scenario plays out in organizations and nations, and yeah, you're watching the same thing. So yeah, families are absolutely locked into it. States, organizations, they're locked into it as well. Here's the thing, historically speaking or otherwise, right? The truly successful anything are the ones that can, of course, navigate their worst times, their adversity. Have nothing to do with the economics of it or anything else, right? It's those who can navigate the adversity. And so, where was any of that education? Where was any of that rhetoric? Where was any of that in that, except for the idealistic all or nothing?
The romanticized version of it.
Exactly. And that's one of my, I mean, it's a beautiful movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to talk trash on it or anything. I'm just saying that it should be looked at as cinema and nothing more. Definitely nothing instructional, because there was not much instruction to take from it other than what not to do.
Yeah. I think anybody could watch this movie, and if they don't listen to this conversation that we just had, they're definitely going to be looking at that scene and like, that's the way it is. That's father says this, tells me to do this or that. The son then rebels or does what Neil does, unfortunately.
Or again, it's not all or nothing. So why not a hybrid?
Right.
Where I can do what Red wants me to do, I can still do my hobby, I can still do this
I
other
think that
stuff.
requires both to come to the table in that aspect, though, and both have to be willing to be wrong.
Yeah.
Or again, at some point in time, very soon, he's got his own path. He's doing his own thing, and it's not like Red's going to be at Harvard with him. He's always going to be seen as the grade. So if you want to go to school during the day and then be a part of the extracurricular activities that are present in all colleges,
Yep.
then at night when you're hanging out with your buddies doing improv, right, then that's a cool scenario. And what a great reprieve where you don't have to make your life the thing that you love. It can be this cherished thing that you do for your friends and the people who actually care about
What about this, though, Dave? Because what if the son does those things out of obedience? Would it absolutely just refuse, like, being a doctor is going to be the most detrimental thing to me. Learning to be a doctor just feels like such a step back with who I am as a person and my identity, my vision, but still goes through with it. Okay. Is it still a level of, like...
Oh, see, that's the point. That's what I'm saying. Where everybody in the school and everybody in the family failed. Where is the level of curiosity? You don't know what you don't know, right? So why not go explore it? How about wait until you fail to determine whether or not you failed?
Good point. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to go to school, you don't know what being a doctor is about. You don't know what the curriculum's like. You might actually be really damn good at it.
But to go try.
But to go try. Look, dude, your dad has a suggestion. He's experienced. Maybe you should take that into account. You can go do this other stuff while you're there. If you happen to suck, that's going to be a conversation, because here's the thing. I sincerely doubt Red wants a failure as a child.
So that's so important. And think about this. Our societies, we have this, it goes back to what you and I in my session. I close airplanes. I go through, close my company, go through personal bankruptcy. The most transformational, one of the most transformational things I've ever experienced in my life. But because of that negative relationship I had with the concept of failure, I was not getting the most out of that experience, right? Failure is not a bad thing. Failure is probably the best thing that we can do.
The best teacher.
Right. Fail fast, fail often, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But because of our desire for safety and certainty, we are unwilling to take those risks in life. That is the true tragedy here. Is like, so think about this. Red's fear that his son is going to become
a failed actor,
whatever, or literature there, definitely maybe even had a less than masculine connotation when you think about that generation. But Red's failure transfers to his son. His son has his own, has assimilated that sense of fear in his own way, right? And both of them are unwilling to acknowledge the fact that you go out and get your nose bloodied by life and you fail, good.
Yeah.
Like you've talked about this before. You've challenged your kids every day. What'd you fail at today? You didn't fail at something. You didn't try hard enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is such a creative and helpful mindset, but our society does not practice that.
Well, let's look at this, right? All right. So I would not be in the boat that I'm in had I not gone and had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? So my first undergraduate is in security management, right? I didn't
Chasing shoplifters,
some of that is involved, but like
or more like higher level.
yeah,
security.
higher level type stuff, and building programs and things like that. Anyway, totally uninspiring. I mean, I was like good at it, but it wasn't anything I was interested in, like really excited about doing. But I was like, all right, I need a degree, and
That works.
yeah, I guess I'm good at that, so I'll go do that. I guess I didn't even know that leadership as a discipline, as a science, even existed. But I found out because I was like, all right,
Why not?
yeah, right. And so I found it, and then I've been chasing it ever since. But I wouldn't have ever been exposed. But that's what college is supposed to do. It's supposed to introduce you to a bunch of different ideas, a bunch of different concepts, a variety of different things, so you get a little bit better idea of what's available, right? And then you're
General
supposed
studies.
to, yeah, and then you're supposed to kind of course correct from there, right? Some people haven't figured out, it's figured out for them at 11. I get that, but you're supposed to learn about these different things. You get exposure to various things, and then start to course correct from there. Again, where was the instruction from Williams on that one? Like, look, here's the thing. Here are what some options. And here's the other side of it too. You're going to get a Harvard education paid for you. If you're 17 or 18, surely you're going to know the value of that, right? Somebody's going to pay to have you go to this, Ivy League
I
school.
don't know, because I rejected that opportunity for my brother, not the Harvard, obviously, but again, like I was completely just digging my heels that I was not going to do whatever he wanted me to do.
So
He
this-
he was going to pay a full ride for me to go to USC. He wanted me to come back after I graduated high school, go back out to California, and he wanted me to go to his alma mater, USC. And he's like, you could live with me, no rent, pay for food, everything. Like, if I was think back on it, put myself in that shoes now, what I know now, I probably would have
Yeah, you'd have done it.
taken it. Yeah, but at that stage of my life,
Where
it
were
was
your
absolutely.
mentors to say that though?
I don't think I had any.
There you go, and that's why this is so
That's-
important,
that's why
guys.
Robin Williams is. That's why that's such a failure in my eyes. There, like that. What happened in that movie is 100% Williams' fault. That character,
Plot twist.
right? Like I just don't see that movie with the same lens that most people do. I look at it as like all right. I see it as Williams, the teacher there, is almost evil.
Whoa.
Right. I mean, it's nefarious, right? So how are you going to take these kids and not give them? I mean, it's one thing to help these kids with passion or whatever, but what happened? They were conditioned, right? And so, but where was here's how you navigate the world with this? It's one thing to tell somebody or help somebody find a passion. It's a completely different thing to help them understand what to do with it. And that was completely absent. And so it's highly irresponsible. Of course that was going to happen.
Wow.
That's why it's called the Dead Poets.
Yeah, right.
So you would consider that two things, just from everything I heard y'all talk. You would say that one, he's kind of like a cult leader, essentially a charismatic leader who
Influences.
the outcome was whatever. He had his own selfish outcome that he wanted, and by the wayside go the rest. But also this could maybe not be a great movie. If you think it celebrates the because every teen has sort of that angst, right? They have that, oh, my parents don't. And this kind of celebrates an outcome of sorts, does it not? Because it
Really,
kind
it
of
does.
glorifies,
Yeah.
it puts him in a light of like, he
kinda
just
made him a
wanted
martyr.
peace. Yeah, it celebrates an outcome of something that a lot of us feel, and so it's a dangerous movie of sorts. And I don't think I took that stance. I surprise. I haven't seen the movie the full way through. I've seen parts. I know, huge surprise. But I would not have, until Dave, you just said that completely. Well, both of y'all, I was not of that mind. I was like, oh, good movie. It sucks the way, I know the guy ends. I knew that the kid
Right.
ended up doing that. I know that.
I was the same way.
Yeah, but now I'm looking at it going, this might be a dangerous movie.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, go back and play the movie, watch the movie, but like maybe even play some like really sinister music in the background.
Oh, okay.
I got that on. I got that on my YouTube channel.
Absolutely. I mean, it becomes very apparent.
Is it
A new
is it-
soundtrack?
Isn't it amazing how music influences your thought process on anything?
Oh,
Like, so they
100%.
play music in this movie, and it's almost heroic. It's poetry, But yeah, to your point, if we change that, yeah, now I'm gonna start looking at Robin Williams' character in a
Yeah.
completely different
I
light.
mean, and it's funny because what was the movie where like he works at a photography studio and he's
Oh,
something
24
like-
hours,
24
48,
hours.
48 hours, something like that. It had something to do with how quickly
Yeah.
they can
Yeah,
make
it's
pictures.
basically
I think I've only seen it once, but he played a really good bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but it's interesting because and he would. I mean, he's an incredible actor, no doubt. But when
Classically trained actor.
Yeah, yeah. But when I see this movie, I see a very similar character. That's just me. Like I said, I feel like
Whoa.
I'm ruining this movie for a lot
Whoa.
of people. But I have felt this way for a very long time.
This is that
That's
John
why I
Travolta
probably
movie all
feel
over again.
prepared for this, because I look at this movie and I mean, like it's been eerie for me for years, and
Yeah,
it's
so
scary to me.
when I was so I went to the Citadel, and so a lot of the cadets at the Citadel were younger. I was, 4 or 5 years older than them, so I was senior. But I was also working at the writing center there, and so we would have orientation. These young freshmen would come through, and we would give an introduction. And I remember standing up on top of the desk just to, because they were like tired. They're basically they call them knobs, basic like a doorknob, because their heads are shaved and everything. So they're freshmen and they're treated in this forming stage. I don't want to call it hazing because they've gotten away from the hazing aspect of it, but these kids would just be tired and they'd come in. So I would jump up on the table and, kind of pull the my captain spiel on them to get their attention. But then I started realizing too that yeah, I'm with you in the sense that it is a cult-like mindset. There is this level of manipulation that he exploits their naivety. He exploits that lack of understanding. But he's also calling out how they are. Ironically, he's calling out how they've been programmed to be producers and consumers rather than artists. And so there's a middle ground there that should be explored, but he doesn't. It is a manipulation.
It's the either or.
Yeah. Yeah. Very little bridge, very little tools, right? I mean, I think that, passion matched with utility is critically important, and we just don't see a lot of it there. And so it's like, yes, be passionate. Oh, absolutely. Dedicate your life to this idea. To me, and you can probably sense even the way that I'm that's how I see that movie.
Find your passion and get somebody to pay you for it, and you'll never have to work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I used to love beer too.
Yeah, but to me, a 10-minute conversation solves all the problem.
Yeah.
All it would have taken.
Conversation. That's it. Like, all right, guys, it's all right to have passion. Very important. This stuff is amazing. It can set your mind free. Absolutely. But, right? Let's have a conversation. And then the kids walk away going, oh, I can actually enjoy poetry, but still pursue these other great things in my life. Interesting. But then we don't have a movie.
There's
Right?
no story.
There's no story. We have a 5-minute YouTube, not even.
Has the conversation
PSA.
and then cue credits.
Yeah,
PSA, public service announcement.
yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, but again, for the movie, and this is where it bothers me, is because again, emotion drives bias, bias drives belief, belief drives behavior, behavior outcome. Well, these type of movies stir up emotions in some really dark places of our lives.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, because we have this idea that something sounds about right, we're like, ooh, I might have to go all in on this.
Something is feeding that fire, whether it's good or bad.
Exactly. And so where we have the chemical just gets fed more and more and more and more. And then we find ourselves into a rut. We'll spiral out. We end up in the wrong side of the adversity nexus because of epistemic rigidity that has been absolutely weaponized against us, right? So we think about the conditioning in society that's already trying to push us into a direction that way anyway, right? What hope do a lot of these people have? Because they're not surrounded by true leaders. They're surrounded by people who are advocating platitudes and things that sound about right. And so, of course, they're going to end up into a very, very dark, negative place, or their organization's going to fail, or the relationship isn't going to live up to
Their identity is
expectations or
warped.
something. Exactly. So to me, yeah, it's very, very dark, entirely unnecessary, and totally recoverable.
I gotta go back and rewatch it now.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna put on.
we need to start getting ready for the meeting after this. But Dave, thank you for ruining another movie for me. I'm gonna
How many
not
is
be able
that
to.
now?
That's definitely two.
Okay.
Phenomenon, and now this one.
Oh yeah.
But thank you for the perspective on that, and you as well, Lance, because I always put myself in Neil's shoes whenever I watch this movie. And now that I have a son, I still am angry at the father. Maybe like what level that is, like I don't sympathize with the father. I'm still with the son even now at 36 years old. But yeah, now I have questions. I have questions about Robin Williams' character. Yeah.
Right.
Now I'm mad at the teacher. So I want to rewatch it now.
And I'm irritated with Neil because I'm like, man, he's a smart.
You
guy.
had a chance.
He's a smart guy, and if he's reading this literature, there are so many stories of the value of the son stepping forward into his own identity as a man. Had he read any Shakespeare, he's gonna be like, oh, this is my moment, right?
Well, I don't know. If he was a Shakespearean, he probably would have found some way to do exactly what he did.
Yeah, Hamlet was, yeah. But my point being,
Hamlet, Romeo, Juliet. What's this one starts with the C? Can't remember.
There would have been a lot of contrast there too, because there's some really good stick up for yourselves literature.
yeah.
Oh,
Point being is that he's there's plenty of lessons, and oddly enough, if Robin Williams' character were doing his job right, he would probably brought that up too. But yeah, I'm more irritated with Neil. Red, the dad, is a product of his upbringing and culture and the age.
And that's fear too, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, agreed. Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to Key is in the Contrast. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely leave some comments down below.
Yeah,
Let us know.
What's the question we should have them answer on the comments below? Who do you relate
Well,
to?
first off, I want to know what you guys think. Is Robin Williams truly the villain in this?
Yeah.
I want someone to prove Dave wrong.
Yeah.
Please, for my own benefit. Secondly, what are some I don't want to say lies, but definitely some rules that you're telling yourself that's just how it should be, that do not benefit you anymore? What's something that you grew up believing that you needed to do this because that's how things were done, but it's really just it's contradictory to you now, and it's a myth. Yeah, exactly. So let us know what you think about that, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.